Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT. However, it is 8 a.m. Eastern Time today. We're doing the crazy thing with daylight savings. We'll be back at 7 a.m. Eastern Time next week. We'll be back into our usual schedule. But for now, we're going to just carry on, get into everything to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some money on the internet. I'm your host, Bchek. I'm joined by my legendary co-host, Legendary, and Sammy. And just a reminder, friends, before we get into the show, nothing that we say here is financial advice. This modern market is exceptionally risky. We don't know anything for sure. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Wednesday. It is the 13th of March. How are you doing?
GM, 7 a.m. EST, 8 a.m. EST. It doesn't matter. BTC is at 73K. That's the number I'm looking at. It's bull market time. I'm doing fantastic. I'm very excited because straight after the show, I'll get in my Uber and I'm on my way to the airport to join you guys in London. And it's going to be good.
I completely forgot about that. That is pretty good. In keeping with the rest of the stuff, right? Like we just can't seem to keep track of all of the exciting things going on at the moment. That's pretty fun.
Do you remember when in the bear market, we sometimes, and the show was way smaller, we sometimes did like a bit of admin chit chat at the beginning of the show because we had literally no idea what we were doing. Imagine if we were to do that now. We basically would take like 1 hour, piss everyone off, everyone would leave, and we still wouldn't be like halfway through the things we wanted to talk through.
Yeah. Yeah, we could be like, yeah, do you think we should have the video clips with the AI, made by the AI, or should we do them by hand? Like what are we thinking here, Legendary? Like, yeah, that's not conversation for the bull market at the start of the show at all. Sammy, what is the conversation for the bull market for you at the moment? How are you doing? What's on your mind?
Well, it seems to be the Solana ecosystem seems to be what's front of mind with all these airdrops around the corner. I think there could be a liquidity injection, so I'm just keeping my eye on that. But yeah, it's good to be back in London as well. Come back from the countryside to join you boys.
Yeah, when you say you're going to be back in London, it's not quite the same as when Legendary said he's going to be back in London. Like, I'm happy that you're back, but you weren't that far. You were you were like, but then do you know what's been happening? Not that this is entirely relevant to the crypto market, but I've been telling people that I'm leaving London as well. Just like, yeah, guys, I'm moving out of London. Like, I've had enough of the city. And then they ask me where I'm going, and then I tell them, and it's just like, mate, that's 30 minutes away from the center, like 45 minutes maximum. But you know what it's like when you're in the city, when you're in the heart of it. I'm sure that this is true of other big centers as well. Like if you're in the heart of New York and in the heart of Miami, or if you're in wherever you are in the world, when you're in the heart of the city, you think like that perimeter is the city. And if you're 35 minutes out, you're not in, you're out.
Are you going to pre-Richmond?
I'm going to pre-Richmond, yeah. Hopefully Richmond by the time I'm there, but that is not confirmed at this point in time. A lot of speculation on that at the moment. But look, let's get into all of the headlines and the news from the NFT market from the last 24 hours. And then we're going to have a discussion on it, as always. We're also going to do a little bit of discussion of where our attention's going, what kinds of things. Sammy mentioned a bit of a Solana focus, and I think that's right. So we're going to spend a little bit of time thinking about that again, just re-evaluating our positions there and our thought processes there, because I think that's important to re-evaluate kind of on a routine basis. And I definitely know Sammy's been re-evaluating certain stuff. So we're going to hear some of his thoughts and the analysis that he's provided in just a moment. Kate, let's get into it, starting with the price action. As always, this is from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you find it does provide some value, please do give it a like. Starting with the price action, crypto is up. Bitcoin is past its all-time high, up a couple of percent at 73.4K. ETH is up a percent at 4K. Solana is chilling just above 150 at 152. In terms of our headlines today, we've got Bitcoin passing all-time high at 73.6K after $1 billion of ETF inflow day. So the Bitcoin inflows hit $1 billion yesterday in the first day ever of $1 billion net daily inflows. Got a few more stats to give on that in just a little bit. Number 2, Premier NFT Solana marketplace Tensor announces the Tensor airdrop is coming soon. They shared some pretty generic details about the foundation and about the token. I don't think any of that's important. We will talk about how to potentially get that token though in just a little bit. And number 3, Choose Rich Nick. All Nick appears on David Portnoy's trading show, and David Portnoy has 3 million followers. Obviously, the president of Barstool Sports. I watched all of it yesterday. That was such a good watch. I gave some thoughts on that. A couple of points that people didn't necessarily pick up. Small touches that won't make the headlines. In fact, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Getting into some price action on the NFT front. CryptoPunks at 51 ETH. Bored Apes at 14.6, down 1%. Mutants at 2.4, up 9%. Bouncing. DeGods up 12% at 1.6. Captains at 3.8, down 11%. Azuki's at 3.8, down 1%. Penguins down 6% at 12.9. Mad Lads steady as ever at 193 Solana. The Nouns winning bid was at 5.9 ETH. We had a CryptoPunk headband selling for 55 ETH, a Crown Penguin selling for 16 ETH, and a Chromie Squiggle Color Spread 7 selling for 15 ETH. That's quite a lot of money now with ETH at 4K, $60,000 or so. So Legendary, that is the price action. Those are the headlines. What do you make of this kind of these scrambled sets of numbers coming out from the NFT market at the moment?
It kind of reflects what's going on in my mind. I'm like, do I want to buy? Do I want to wait? Some things are going up, some things are going down. There's a couple of collections I'm looking at. We spoke about the Captains. We spoke about Stakeland launching yesterday, seeing a bit of a correction also in the meme token price. We saw people like Duck, like Moritz, buying an ape yesterday, probably trying to see if the market has found the bottom there.
He flipped it. Did you not see?
Sorry, he flipped it already.
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
He tweeted it exactly how Franklin used to tweet it. Like I flipped
what
this
was in profit? I didn't
in 17 minutes for 0.03 ETH profit, blah blah blah. And I messaged to say, let's do this. Let's do this.
Love it. Let's have a new Franklin. Let's have a new ape main character trader. I love that. No, but like it's a weird market right now with NFTs, because obviously you have some positive momentum also in like things that don't have necessarily an airdrop coming, because it seems that people are trying to find out, is there a bottom or not. So I'm starting to think that I want to become a buyer in a couple of collections, but I don't know if I'm quite there yet.
I mean, it is very interesting you say that, because clearly a couple of collections bounced yesterday. I'm just going back to the previous page to show which ones were. I mean, Bored Ape Yacht Club might not show that being down 0.5%, but it was really collapsing yesterday. I've got these charts up on the screen for the people watching in, but for the people not, I'll just kind of indicate what happened. So, I mean, in the last 7 days, Bored Apes have gone from 18 ETH. Damn, 18 ETH down to 14.59. But yesterday at their bottom, they went under 13 ETH at one point in time, according to these charts, and has since recovered with a bounce kind of up to 14.6 now. So definitely someone thought maybe along the same lines as you, Legendary, like are we getting near a bottom? Probably. Although I did see, and important to note, Cyrus tweeted that he injected $1.2 million of loans into the Bored Ape ecosystem. And in the exact same way that when the founder of MetaStreet said they were going to provide like $1 million of liquidity on the loan side for Pudgy Penguins, and then that kind of settled them down when it looked like they were going into some kind of crisis. It seems like just saying that, Cyrus just communicating that, has done a similar thing for the Bored Ape market, and it's managed to bounce off there. How much do you attribute the bounce to potentially that, Legendary, and how much do you attribute it to maybe them being down so aggressively the last few days that they were going to bounce anyway? What do you think?
I think 1/3 factor. I had a conversation with Moritz yesterday that he brought up was that I think Hanwei dumped like half of his stack, or has gotten rid of half of his ape stack, and that people might be watching that as well. if he's kind of quote unquote like finally liquidated or finally out of the collection, however you want to frame it or phrase it, because I wasn't following his trades on the one hand, and on the other hand, then you certainly have the positive momentum that Cyrus has set. I do think that those factors play together. And I don't think that necessarily the number matters, because we saw it, as you said, with the MetaStreet founder who put liquidity up for like what, 34, 38, like in the 30 to 40 pudgy range, while there were like 400 outstanding loans that weren't all looking too good. Wasn't really like making a dent in the market, but more so about like the positive sentiment that then transpired to the timeline. And I think 1 milli might sound much, but it's not that much if you think about the current USDC prices and still the floor price of an ape. That's like what, apes at 15, ETH at 40. That's like 15 apes or something like that. That's not a lot. But it's more about the reach and the sentiment that comes with it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I actually agree with that final point. Like the loan thing that's going on is pretty interesting. I obviously watch the loan markets quite a lot. It does seem to be the case so far, and it's only happened 2 times. But when someone like quite prominent and publicly has just said, guys, I'm going to absorb this stuff if you guys don't, then it just seems to give the market confidence. And they don't actually even need to do all of it. Just by saying it out loud and being public about it seems to give people confidence. But the other really interesting thing you said, which I think is definitely true too, and I want to hear Sammy's thoughts on this in a moment as well, is like this idea, like watching Hanway's wallet, for example. And for people who don't know, Hanway is one of the huge whales playing in the Blur farming game, made a huge amount in Blur, I think in Blur season 1, Blur season 2 as well. And I guess what people are doing to try to get a sense of where the bottom is looking at these huge wallets who they know don't want to hold their apes. Once they have sold their apes or either got liquidated or sold them just because they were holding them and sold them into bids, then they should get a sense that there are no more sellers left, because those people are more likely to be out of the market. So it's a kind of a dangerous game to be playing, because I'm sure there'll always be other potential sellers too, but it's those people that are really moving the markets at the moment, because the price is dictated by these farmers to some extent. Sammy, what are your reflections on that? I think that's actually a really important thing to think about, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as, if you look at the traditional finance order book, you have like bids and offers kind of countering each other. If you've got someone that holds a lot, then obviously if they hit those into bids, those bids disappear, it becomes a little bit lopsided. And then there is that risk of cascading. And I think that is the overarching sentiment around market confidence. And if you see that happening, people start to panic. They're like, oh, how low can this go? You don't want to see that paper trading loss at whatever amount without realizing it. So you kind of panic sell, maybe try and trade the market. So yeah, I think there is that. I think it's a bit of a mind game. So people making those announcements does kind of stem that panic. And as you mentioned with the MetaStreet founder with Pudgies, and then obviously more recently with Cyrus, it kind of makes sense. They've got influence, so they're using that influence for good in a way to stem that panic and prevent those losses from cascading.
It is interesting though, because like I think all of these things are connected in the sense that the price goes down because these farmers are holding things that they don't want, and eventually they're going to dump them. So that creates some downward sell pressure. And what that does is it creates all of these loans underwater. But then someone comes in and says, don't worry, I'm going to look after a bunch of these loans. But even at that point, the price is still down and there are still loans underwater. So you're still going to need some buyer to come in and move the floor price back up so that the loans aren't underwater. So all of these things are connected, I think, in a very interesting way. And it's not obvious to me exactly which is like the most important thing, but I think they all play their role. Legendary, any final reflections on that before we move to captains, because you mentioned their price action, something interesting you.
Nothing really to add to that. I think maybe one thing to add to that. I'm sorry. I think it's important to also keep in mind, if you have like those bigger actors, like, you know, Cyrus is an outstanding guy. Met him in Paris in person. He did the great thing with the loan. I think it was a Fidenza that someone defaulted on because they forgot to pay it back. He reached out to them, didn't pocket the profit, and settle that transaction. But generally speaking, if you have bigger traders who are getting in and like basically providing the market with hope, nothing stops them once the floor price has recovered a bit from dumping all of that again and taking a profit again. It's not something that Cyrus does, not something that I would expect the MetaStreet founder to, because he obviously wants Pudgies to do well because they added that to the product portfolio. But with other people, if they come in, it is, I think, important to like keep in mind that they are not bound to keep those assets forever and can dump at any time and create even more despair than existed before.
Yeah, very fair enough. Good point to make. Just before we get on to some of the other random kind of price action, a lot of things up, a lot of things down. Shout out to Muse Michael in the comments on X saying, we don't need a new Franklin with the old one back, because Franklin tweeted 19 hours ago, I just flipped the Mutant Ape for 0.0019 ETH profit after gas and fees in 59 minutes 48 seconds. So that's pretty hilarious. I wonder whether Franklin is truly getting back in the swing of things as he was before. Okay, so pretty crazy price action, like certain things bouncing. DeGods also, I think, bounced 12% up to 1.57. Captains, however, down almost 10%. I think this must be in some way, look, I know all projects have been struggling with the rising price of ETH, so that's one thing that's happening. But there was that announcement about Stakeland. They were down on the same day that everything was down, and now there's an additional day now where they're down, even when other things are starting to bounce a little bit. What's your reflection on Captain's Legendary, and what's your reflection on Stakeland and anything you might have learned about that?
Yeah, Stakeland announcement I liked. I think I said on the show last week that I did buy into meme, but before the news, I did also basically sell and rebought my bag after the announcement because
but you chose the coin though.
I chose the coin. I chose the coin.
That's exactly. We'll talk about that in a second, but carry on.
I chose the coin, did a bit of the swing trade there, but I'm still looking at the captains and still thinking that again, NFA and my personal look at it, it seems to become a very, very attractive price point.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely fair enough. But what I find interesting, and we've been speaking about this in general quite a lot at the moment, right, is that there's more liquidity in the coins. And sometimes when you can't make sense of everything that's going on, it's interesting to just watch your own behavior and see how you feel and make interesting observations from that. And it does seem to be the case. Like, look, those captains exist. You think they're cool. You think Memeland is cool. But even with all of that happening, you decided to go for the token in this particular market at this particular time. And I think that's pretty emblematic of what a lot of people are thinking and feeling at the moment, where it's like, look, we know there's the NFT associated with the collection. We know that exists. We know it's kind of cool. We'd maybe like to have one to be a part of it more. Because I think people do feel part of it more when you have the NFT. Like, you don't feel as much part of it with just the coin. However, that's not how they're voting with the wallets at the moment. They will go for the coin as things stand. Sammy, any reflections on that? This idea that people are just definitely choosing the coins over the NFTs at the moment. What's the psychology there? What's the thinking?
Yeah, I think my computer's freezing a little bit, so let me know if you can't hear me. I'm good. Yeah, so I get why Chris probably did the coins. It makes sense from a liquidity standpoint. You don't know where the bottom is. Generally, tokens that are tied to NFTs kind of mirror that price action. We've seen it with Pixels and Sappies, Ape and BAYC. So I think that, like, if you're taking a directional bet on it and you want a short term, you want to be able to get out easily, the coin makes sense. If you've got a longer term view and you don't mind that lockup, it makes sense to buy the yield generating asset. You've got the meme token I think you look at the prices and it's a discount. So the NFT is trading at a discount. So I think it depends on your time frame. If you want that liquidity early, then maybe the coin it makes more sense. But I think if you've got a long-term view on the Memeland ecosystem and you're willing to lock it up, then the asset makes more sense.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's definitely how it's playing out at the moment. So something to watch. Another interesting thing, I was talking to a trader who's been around like a few more cycles than me. very confident, and although NFTs have only been properly around for one cycle, he was very, very adamant that like a run in NFTs, whether that's in the ones that exist or whether whether it's a run on like new ones that are created, is a late stage of the cycle thing. Like we're way too early in the broader crypto cycle for people to start running at NFTs at the moment. They need to go to the coins first. They need to make their money in DeFi. They need to do all these yield crazy strategies. Now the USDC is up 60%, or I don't, with 40% yield or whatever. Like, I don't think that's the way people want to make their money. But I guess the reason why that yield is so high is people want their USDC because they think that they can make more than that playing in all the various games at the moment. So I think people need to do that, or at least this was their argument. They need to do that in order that they can go and spend their money on some hard-earned NFTs later on, a little bit later. So that's that position. Legendary, before I want to get into the Bitcoin stuff now, but just as an idea in terms of thinking about where we are in the cycle and this concept that a run on NFTs could come much later because people need to make their money, obscene amounts of money first. Like, do you have a particular thought on that? What do you think?
I think it's generally something that we have seen, but I'm always cautious to apply like generalisms to entire cycles, because you can have a cooling off in BTC and ETH pumping, gas fees chilling, and then people might look at NFTs way sooner than expected. You have, I don't know, you have Magic Eden, for example, I think today with the Diamonds claim for the historical trading activity on NFTs going back to 2017. So that could be quite massive for a couple people, could be a quite massive airdrop. Now, I know the hopium is always, an airdrop flow back into NFTs, and that's not really often the case, but this is a very NFT specific airdrop. So I do think that those patterns, how we see money flowing throughout the cycles, often hold true. But I also think that like within cycles, you see momentum changing very, very quickly. And I wouldn't be surprised to see like a mid-cycle NFT season for one particular reason that triggered however it might look like.
It's interesting. I was just going to ask myself the question. Like I did say, if you can't make sense of anything or it's getting a bit confusing, you're trying to observe other people, just like, what are you doing? And on my mind at the moment, like, are my profits from airdrop season going into NFTs? And it was funny. Like my initial answer was no, they're not, but they actually are. Some of them are. So I don't know why I didn't like factor that in my head, but like I have put an allocation into like Node Monks, for example. And I also and very genuinely, I don't know if this will play out, but like I do have Mad Lads on my mind again. I had one much earlier and then I sold it, but I don't know. Maybe that will be something that I'm thinking about as well. So interesting to think about it from a personal perspective. I want to get into the headlines. We want to talk about Bitcoin being past all-time high at 73.6K after $1 billion ETF inflow. Pretty amazing volume once again. I've got a little bit of data here to share. I'm going to share it on screen for the people watching in, and then we'll just read it out for the people who are listening. My computer is being slow, but it will be with us in 1 second. Here we go. Whale Panda. This was retweeted by Farside UK, who've been providing all of this great Bitcoin data. Yesterday's net inflows was a net Billy, $1.045 billion of inflows. BlackRock with 850 million of net inflows, which is a new record. GBTC only 79 million outflows. Price went down to liquidate some FOMOers, but we are back at 73K. Pretty outstanding numbers, like pretty bullish. It was funny. There was a period of time yesterday on the timeline for some reason where everyone had flipped bearish and they thought that it was all over because we were down like a couple of percent on the day. Important to, take the timeline sentiment with a little bit of salt, I think. And then want to point out, kind of link those huge numbers. We've spoken about those numbers over and over again. They're clearly going up in kind of in an aggressive way. I don't want to ask the same question I always ask, but I want to tie it to this tweet from CL the cat, who is, I think, a prominent crypto tweeter. Cat have simply stopped believing in cycles because the idea of being able to buy Bitcoin at less than 80% just for it to 10x repeatedly forever is absurd. Also, crypto natives have never had a smaller impact on Bitcoin's price action. It's over for cycles, up only. Legendary, what do you think on the huge amounts of inflows coming in? And do you subscribe to this idea that this cycle thing that we're used to, maybe for Bitcoin, is coming to an end? We cannot just wait for it to dump 80% again and then buy it again and it's going to go up. Like the game's changed.
A couple of things. So I generally resonate with the thought. However, I don't think that cycles are over. Crypto markets are still a very small asset class.
Sure.
We are like what 2.7 trillion, like total cap. If you compare that to the stock market or whatever else, that is just a fraction of that. And there's still cycles in stock markets and in all kinds of assets, which are, you know, by multiple factors bigger than the crypto market. What I do think is the message here, it's not that it's over for cycles and it's up only. It is that we might see different types of volatility. If we do get to a point where you have lots of institutions in and retail comes in and there is like a constant minimum of ETF buying pressure that or not even pressure, a buying level or threshold that is sustaining itself, then I might think that we don't see those like 80% corrections any longer. However, with that being said, I still think that because we are so small and because if you look at the infrastructure of crypto, you have a couple of key players who all of them could pose a systemic risk. Like if one of the top 200 global companies is defaulting tomorrow, I don't think that we are crashing and we are going like into a complete crisis. I mean, depending on the company, but generally speaking, I don't think this is what would happen. If Binance fucks up something, or not that I think this is happening, but all I'm saying is you have more things in crypto that could trigger a black swan event and that have triggered massive volatility events than maybe like in the traditional stock market. So I wouldn't subscribe to the idea that it's up only, but I do think that we are like reducing volatility, but cycles will still continue to exist, but they might look different.
Interesting stuff. I want to go to Kusho, has their hand raised in just a moment. Also want to hear from Sammy, but before we do that, I just want to go through some of the comments because I think there's some either interesting or entertaining comments as well. Alex replied saying, pretty sure we will find a way to do something really dumb, which will pull a negative 80% down somehow. The cat's response to that was alts could maybe go down 90%, Bitcoin down 40% seems reasonable. Fubar said last cycle required mass FTX fraud to do a down 80%. This time around, US would have to ban Bitcoin for it to pull another 80%. I think one of the interesting fears that is kind of surfacing now, I haven't seen the idea that they're literally going to ban Bitcoin. I think it wouldn't make any sense now that all the ETF stuff is happening. But there is this idea, or a fear that I've seen emerging, which is that the government is going to try to what's the word when you like try to take everyone's crypto? Oh no, either like take people's crypto or try to tax unrealized gains.
Steal is the word you're looking for.
Steal, that's the one. There's another word as well, but like because there's this movement in the US, or my understanding is that there's this conversation going on, which is like, should we be taxing unrealized gains somehow? Which I think is completely insane anyway, like taking crypto out of it. But I think the way crypto is related to that is obviously people are sitting on huge gains on crypto. And that would be one way for the government to be able to get their hands on it. Confiscate was the word I was looking for. Want to hear your thoughts on that in a second. A few more comments. Sassel says, Cat, please, no super cycle talk until at least 100K or 10K. So very exceptionally bullish stuff there. Legendary, you were just coming back there. Any thoughts on this confiscation idea? Is that just me getting too far into the weeds of the internet? And then we'll go to Kusho and Sammy.
I mean, taxing unrealized profits would be horrible. Like talking from the perspective of my own jurisdiction, one of the very few situations where we tax unrealized profits for individuals is exit tax. So if you want to move out of Austria, you do have to disclose everything you have and pay capital gains on all of the positions that have or that carry unrealized profit in them. I don't know if this is the case for the US. I do know that this is the case for a few European countries, but obviously if that would be like the standard, if that be a way to access unrealized profits, that would be horrible, absolutely horrible.
Yeah, fair enough. Kusho, your hand was raised. Would love to hear your perspective from someone kind of operating in a very different region to us.
GM, it's been a while I spoke here. Usually when it comes to like being super pessimistic or thinking of worst case scenarios, I go to K Sensei. I don't go to myself. But in this case, it's like I feel we've gone past the point where we could have like a huge catastrophic event that would like completely lead to the end of crypto as we know it. I think we've passed that side of things. I think we are so bullish right now that it's apparent that um very, very, very unlikely. Even in Nigeria, it's very unlikely that we go to zero. Like even with the crypto ban that's currently in place, and the government running helter skelter to try and lock down on crypto, to try and tie down people from buying USDT to kind of quote unquote save the exchange rate. Um, it's still unlikely because trading will keep happening. I mean, people will keep making these moves forward, especially with the US now being slightly a little bit more progressive than it has always been towards crypto. So I think with the big boys playing the game, everybody else is just going to want to play the game. And just as we've seen in like the past few years, even if the big boys don't want to play, people just move to another field and play in a different jurisdiction. So I think we might be past the point of like being super scared of losing everything. But at the same time, I don't think I want to underestimate the possibility of possible black swans in this industry because even the largest black swans so far have been completely unexpected by even people who have been in the space for 10 years and beyond. Nobody expected FTX, nobody expected Terra, and they still happen nonetheless. So it's like we should probably look at this cycle and look at the things that have become commonplace and common sense to us and still have some level of fear around them. So one example would be Binance. Like everybody is getting so used to using Binance as an off ramp, but at the same time, it's like we need to be cautious. And then it's a global thing, particularly with Binance because Binance works everywhere else except from the US. So it's like everybody is using Binance. That means everybody should be scared of Binance coming down because it's like Binance going down would be catastrophic for us. Same thing with Coinbase. Same thing with like some of the other infrastructure rails that we have gotten used to. So we should pay attention to them, but we are past it. I mean, pay attention, but be bullishly, fearful. Like be bullish, like spend money and buy an island while being scared of losing everything.
Okay, so nice contradictory perspective. Okay, yeah, island sounds good. Look, I agree with you that the black swans are never foreseen, and so there's always the potential. I think, yep, you've got big centralized exchanges which represent those. I also think Bitcoin is like really pushing itself at this point. Like it had this narrative, and now it's moving towards this world where there's going to be L2s, there's going to be other things. Like the narrative is going to slightly change around that, and which means the messaging could potentially change too. So I think that's.
Let me hop in real quick. So it's like there's this problem that you usually talk about, which is it's like you don't like using exchanges for converting it into BTC. I feel like once we get past that point and actually have something useful for getting it into BTC, then we don't really have a need to be afraid of exchanges anymore.
Yeah, very fair point. And then the other one I wanted to mention before I come back to you with a question is ETH restaking. Like I feel like there's a lot of people, you might not see this on the timeline. Everyone's like hyper bullish Eigenlayer because they want to throw all their ETH in there and get a fat airdrop at some point in time. But like there are risks associated with staking, and there's like more risks associated with restaking, and people don't necessarily articulate that as much as they do for other things, particularly when there's an airdrop coming and people think it's going to be all okay. Kusha, I just wanted to ask a quick follow-up question because I think it'd be interesting for people who are listening in from other places. You mentioned the ban in Nigeria. Like, how exactly does that play out at the moment? Is that is that been in place all the time? Is that a hard ban? Like, what's the situation? And is that going to come to an end as the world moves on? And then we're going to go to Sammy.
So the Nigerian government is very finicky about crypto. Initially, there was a ban by the previous government before the current administration got into power. And then these guys came in and lifted the ban. Everybody was like, yay, back to degening. And then a few weeks later, people started complaining about the exchange rate going bananas. And it's usually an economic factor. Like, I don't think it is because Nigerians buy a lot of USDT on Binance that the exchange rate has been going to shit. But the government finds a way to blame it on crypto one way or the other. And as a result of that, they've decided to take and enforce action on crypto. Just recently, they arrested 2 executives of Binance in the country that came in to discuss with the government. And it's like, that has happened, but people still buy what they buy.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah,
interesting.
Practically unaffected. I mean, I already left Binance. I had an issue. I already left Binance. But I still have my ways of getting crypto into my real world, everyday life, simply because they don't really enforce it to the point of like IP blockers for every kind of crypto related website. It's not a hard ban. It's kind of like a soft ban kind of thing.
Interesting. Okay, cool. That's really interesting. Interesting perspective to hear from other people around the world to try to figure out what the kind of political situation is and how that's affected. Sammy, you wanted to make a final point here before we move on to Tensor.
Yeah, I think just on Kushe's point, I think sending stuff to exchanges now gives me anxiety. Just the thought that you could suddenly get blocked and then that's it. So I'm pro decentralization, but I think there's a couple of points on the future risks and black swan events. Like obviously, Bchek mentioned that you don't really foresee them because that's the nature of a black swan. But I guess going forward, it's going to be like technological advancements. We talk about quantum computing. Like, could you overthrow like blockchain? Does it become as secure? I could see that as a huge risk. I could see like if we go back into the dark ages because of whatever state, then the internet might cut out, and then how do we run those nodes in the network? How do we do all that kind of stuff? But I guess if that happens, we've got probably bigger concerns anyway. And I think just going back to Kat's point about cycles, like and how we look at Bitcoin. Yes, we might not say, oh, we're never going to get Bitcoin down 80%, but I could definitely see a place in the future that if this becomes the go-to asset, then all of a sudden people start denominating things and referring to things as Satoshis. So it's, I have 1 million Satoshis, or that could be the direction that it goes, as opposed to referring to something as Bitcoin, because that, say 10 years prior, might have been feasible to buy a Bitcoin, but maybe in 10 years time, it's not feasible. So people denominate in Satoshis, and that mindset changes.
Yeah, interesting point. I think that unit bias is quite important. So it makes sense that people might have to find a different unit in the same way that like you used to have pounds. Well, you still do have pounds, but pounds and pence, right? Like you've got to have a smaller unit to the big unit. So I think that makes sense. I want to deal with Tensor and Solana airdrop season in a minute, but let's just get through the Web3 roundup to get us up to speed with everything else that's been happening in the space in the last 24 hours first. As always, I'll get this up on screen for the people watching in and read it out for the people who are just listening in. As always, it's from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. Let's get into it. Elixir Modular Blockchain closes Series B at an $800 million valuation. We've been talking about how some of these valuations are getting higher and higher as we go. Number 2, D-Labs team announced that DeGods and y00ts will have an option to bridge back to Solana. I didn't really see many people talking about that, but I picked that up from one of the team members, Sunny Mans, who said, whenever the bridge is done, DeGods and y00ts will have the choice to be back on Solana. I think that's pretty big news. That's why I included it. Next, Pack airdrop anticipated meme coin to launch on Blast today. That seems to be the meme coin that's kind of garnered the biggest hype over the longest period of time on Blast, attempting to launch later today. Number 4, as we already mentioned earlier, Cyrus injects 1.2 million into Bake loans. Bored Apes recover to 14.6 ETH, and Mutant Apes are up 9%. Getting into some other news, Jack Butcher announces new VV 1 of 1s with the only bidding currency accepted being unrevealed OPEPENs. Very interesting mechanic there. Obviously, unrevealed OPEPENs already can qualify as part of this raffle system to become a revealed OPEPEN, depending on what art Jack produces as part of the OPEPEN series. Now there's trying to add like more utility to that token in a sense to bring it into part of this bidding process. Interesting. Next, 12-fold generative art on Bitcoin by Yuga Labs released as physical for eligible holders. And finally, Drake shares Michael Saylor Bitcoin takes to his 146 million Instagram followers. Legendary. That is the Web3 roundup from around the space in the last 24 hours. Anything you want to touch on at all before we get into Tensor?
No, very, very happy to get into Tensor straight away. I think maybe one additional point that I want to add to the discussion that we will be having is the point I made earlier on the Magic Eden Diamond drop for G ETH NFT collective also being today. And I don't think that is a coincidence that we have both those announcements happening on the same day.
Okay, so before we get into Tensor, then what do you think? Maybe we deal with all of these things together, frankly, because I guess the headline from the Tensor news is just, okay, Tensor is a premier NFT trading platform on Solana. It's going to do a token. I don't think they actually revealed many more details in their announcement today. But why don't you speak to Legendary, like Magic Eden doing it, having this kind of points program or diamond program going on at the moment, Tensor doing it. First question, do you have any preference, thoughts on either of these two platforms? Why is it, why do we think that these are going to be valuable airdrops?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think, to me personally, trading on Solana, I like Tensor more. However, I obviously have a shit ton of volume of trading ETH NFTs going back like 4 years. So definitely very, very excited for the diamond claim on Magic Eden. And what's more important is that Magic Eden is multi-chain, is obviously the home of ordinals as it stands right now, is catering a bit to the Polygon audience as well, has obviously ETH NFTs, so is the broader product here. And I think what we are seeing is that like airdrop competition, and basically also Tensor saying, if you're farming Magic Eden on that, we will notice that, is getting to a very, very PvP kind of stage. And that also goes for the, not only like for the war on users, if you want to call it like that, but also for the war on attention. It's like very obvious to me that Tensor doesn't want Magic Eden to have their big day like in isolation, to be the main headline of the day when it comes to NFT marketplaces, with people who will certainly flex the amount of diamonds that they will be claiming, and that they're making sure to also have like a token related news on the same day. And it's quite fascinating to observe how like this competition is like heating up more and more, because we didn't have it in the last cycle in this form. The last cycle was like pretty easy. You had OpenSea, then you had LuxRare, who was able to shine, or which was able to shine for a bit with a massive airdrop claim, with investors who made outrageous returns on that, etc., etc. And then you had the Blur era coming in. Obviously, there's X2Y2 and other marketplaces as well, but you didn't have like two big marketplaces who are getting a decent market share and like trying to innovate feature-wise, fighting at the same time for a token launch and for the user base and attention in this space.
Look, I completely agree. The only thing I think we're missing there is that Blur is still in the background doing their stuff. And to the question of why is this stuff so valuable, I can't remember the exact number, but the Blur airdrop back at the beginning was top 10 airdrops in Ethereum history. Like, that's how big that stuff was. And I think people are speaking about the Tensor airdrop, at least, as being, maybe it might not be that same number, as in like, it might not be a top 10 number for Ethereum airdrops, but as far as the Solana ecosystem goes, like, I think it could be right up there because of how much it's been used and the quality of the product and the value of the transactions and attention that it's kind of achieved. An interesting question I was wondering is, maybe there's a couple of questions here. It's funny that Magic Eden basically is cross-chain. Magic Eden does all of this stuff. It does everything. And yet there does seem to be something that people like Tensor for Solana. Like Solana, Tensor is still focused on Solana. Magic Eden, I mean, primarily, realistically, I use Magic Eden because for ordinals. That's why I use it, because they've got ordinals. Where do you see this going? Do you think that Tensor has to add ordinals, ETH, NFTs, and anything else? Do you think Magic Eden can win by having all of them? Do you think Blur's going to come in and say, well, here's our ordinals thing now because that's where the volume is? Like, is it going to be an everything marketplace, just like Elon Musk trying to create the everything app, and then we've got to have everything marketplaces? Or is it actually better for someone to be like, no, we are the home of trading for Solana, like Tensor? Like, I think they've done a pretty good job on that brand as things stand, but would love to hear your thoughts, and come to Sammy after.
Look, from a management consulting perspective, you're just seeing companies trying to position themselves in the market, and you will have generalistic companies. You have Amazon, the home of online shopping. You have maybe Magic Eden, the home of digital collectibles. On whatever chain they might be, you can buy them there under one consistent user interface that's easy to use. And then you have the specialists. You have Tensor with the market making features, etc., that specializes on a very specific community, being the Solana community, akin to how you have online shops that cater to a very specific audience, where that's like an expert for hi-fi and who has a completely different shopping experience than Amazon. I think that both those models can coexist, and I don't think that the right move is to try to copy your competitor, and if you're a specialist, try to become the generalist. I don't necessarily think this always is the right move. And I think for Blur, Blur kind of evolved a bit from just being in that marketplace game, obviously, by saying, what's more important than, or more interesting than only having a marketplace is having an own blockchain, an own layer 2 solution, and playing that infrastructure/ecosystem game a bit more. And for them, NFTs will be a part of that, but it won't be everything that is happening on that blockchain, because it will have DeFi, GambleFi gaming, and all those other things that you can do on the blockchain of your choice.
Yeah, you're right. Blur is still obviously the marketplace, but with Blast, that whole operation has become a way bigger universe now, and of which only a portion is dedicated to NFT trading. So I can see what you mean there, that they've got bigger fish to fry in some respect. Look, we've only got 5-7 minutes left of the show. What I want to do now is, look, Choose Rich is part of the headline again. Nick did an awesome job. I think everyone enjoyed that on the timeline yesterday. Hopefully, wishing that he continues with that stuff. I don't think we necessarily need to talk about it more today. I'd rather use the time to continue the Solana airdrop conversation and get some of Sammy's thoughts on the constant reevaluation of where your attention is going, because I know he's been running some numbers and putting some thoughts out there as to where all of these things are going. And the reason why we're doing this, just for the people who maybe are unsure, is literally this tweet. I've seen multiple tweets like this from Moon Overlord at the moment, and Ansem as well. Just Solana airdrop season is about to hit like a truck. That's what's about to happen, guys. The Solana airdrop season is about to hit like a truck. So Sammy, how are you preparing to get hit?
I think it's probably just worth setting the scene. I know we've only got 7 minutes, but I mean, the types of airdrops that are coming through, lending protocols, so Kamino, MarginFi, Parcel, which is real estate index. You got Tensor for NFT trading. So you've got all these potential liquidity unlocks for certain types of participants, whether they're traders, investors, or whatever. And I think that you look at, so for me personally, I used to farm, I am farming, but I used to farm more so Kamino. Okay. But for me personally, I think looking at the way they're structuring the airdrop, it kind of favors the whale, because
so for people thinking about it, then how are you able to identify shit, this one's not for me for whatever reason, maybe I need to adjust?
So it's benchmarking. So benchmark against other protocols with tokens, whether it's in the same blockchain or on another similar size blockchain. So if I look at Kamino specifically, there's not really one with a token on Solana. So maybe if I go to Avalanche, look at Bencree Lending, it's about 200 million FDV. So you can use that as a benchmark to then kind of work out what the overall token price is going to be based on 10 billion tokens for Kamino. And you can work out a rough price based on that. Or you could go to the other end, so compare it to maybe ETH. If you think Solana is going to become an absolute giant, then maybe comparing it to Aave. which is I think like a 2 billion, so 10x that. So you can work out a price based on that, but you can then work out based on how they've come up with the airdrop mechanics as to whether like it's worth you farming it, or you might be being farmed, because if you've got whales coming in with Kamino specifically, it's a linear sort of airdrop schedule, which basically means that the more points you earn, the more of the airdrop you get, rather than the tiered stuff that we see with like Jito, or where like the little man got like 15k. That just wouldn't happen with Kamino. So at that point, it's like, okay, well, am I big enough to be able to earn a decent token to then justify my capital being deployed here, or is there a better opportunity elsewhere? And I think for me personally, like I look at Parcel, like it's raised a decent amount. We haven't really got a real estate index, so there's not much of a proxy as to what it could come out at. I think it could be a surprise, and I think like protocols like Drift, they've raised a decent amount. So looking at where that might land could be quite significant as well. And it's not necessarily farmed that well. There's not many wallets doing it. So
two that definitely seem to be slightly less under the radar for me are Drift, and is it Zeta, another kind of margin trading platform?
Yeah, so I haven't really looked into Zeta. I've heard of it. It's on that massive list of protocols, but I just haven't had the chance to look into it. So I've just picked a few winners and just stuck to it. But yeah.
Okay, so what are in your mind the winners at the moment?
Well, I think the Kamino announcement, I would say people have shifted to Kamino, so maybe going back to MarginFi might not be a bad bet if you want to go into lending and supplying liquidity. Okay. I think that Drift is a pretty good bet, or even just using all the features on Dupe. Like they've got another second airdrop coming in January. There's no worries in like building up a bit of volume for that airdrop. I know it's a long time away, but that could be fairly lucrative if you consistently use it, which if you like meme coin trade and stuff, you probably are. I think Parcel, for me personally, you can rack up quite a few points relatively quickly if you use their trading features. Like most people are just dumping USDC in the liquidity pools and earning 4x on that. But if you actually trade on leverage, which actually it's not that volatile, you could earn like 3-4 times that in terms of points just by trading with the same liquidity. So it's just probably like digging into certain projects that have decent funding that could come out at a higher valuation, and then allocating your time to really understanding that protocol, testing it, and then seeing, like, trying to get that competitive advantage.
Yeah, interesting stuff. I think there's a number of good ones that you mentioned there. Legendary, what are your reflections on the Solana ecosystem? What's kind of catching your eye, and what would you be allocating your attention to at the moment?
I'm in a very, very similar boat to Sammy. Have a lot allocated to Parcel. Haven't had a chance to use Drift yet. Obviously did a bit of trading on Tensor. Also, I was active in Kamino. I wasn't like aware of that shift that Sammy has been describing, that it's basically getting more and more of a like playground for whales. So I'm do think about where I want to redistribute that. Also staking a bit on some of the staking solutions. But apart from that, nothing really to add to that Solana perspective, apart from agreeing with Parcel being my main bet for sure.
Okay. Fair enough. I think that's an interesting set of perspectives. I also don't have much to add to things from a Solana perspective. The only thing that I would say is that I wouldn't take your eyes off the Bitcoin ecosystem. We mentioned this the other day, relative to even the people getting involved on Solana. The people getting involved on Bitcoin is far, far fewer. So something like Liquidium, where you can do some lending against NFTs, is being done by so few people in comparison with how many people are doing it on Sharkify or something. So definitely worth keeping that in mind. But having said that, we are at time, guys. Apologies to Tiro. We've just run out of time for the show. But we hope that was interesting to you. Thought it was important to get that kind of Solana airdrop checker session out of the way. And the thing is, and I think maybe the key learning, or one of the key learnings, is that this is like a constant reevaluating process. And I think as we go through the bull market, I mean, me and Legendary were speaking about this off air before. It's just like constant reevaluation of how your portfolio sits versus what's happening in the market versus some of the goals that you want to achieve. So We'll be doing that with all of these things and more. We hope that you'll be there to discuss it with us as we go through. So guys, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to, as always, Legendary and Sammy, my co-host. Thank you to our speakers, Kusho and Tiro. And thank you to everyone else in the audience who has joined us. We will be back tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT. Hope you have a wonderful day. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.